could ever be? Is she just going to be another wicked Jezebel sitting on another wicked throne in another country? Or could she change? I'd like to say, oh yeah, she could change. Notice what happens. Verse 3. Speaking of Ahaziah, her son, the queen mother has an influence. Notice what it said of her. He also walked in the ways of the house of Ahab, for his mother was his counselor to do wickedly. Remember that the house of Ahab was the worst of the worst for following after the Baals and the Ashtaroth. They were the worst. They had not only embraced the worship of the golden calves, but they just brought in all the other popular gods around them. And they built temples. They had built temples in his city, Samaria, for Baal. And he built a grove for the Ashtaroth. He had done all of that. And now, Azariah, it says, he walked in the ways of the house of Ahab. But why did he do that? Why did he do that? You'll notice the very next phrase in verse 3 tells us why he did that. His mother. Look at that. It doesn't say his dad. It doesn't say his granddaddy. It doesn't say his great-granddaddy. It doesn't say anything about Omri or anything about Ahab influencing him yet. It says his mother was his counselor. Do you ever wonder why the football players always wave at the camera and say, "Hey, Mom"? Mom was in the house cooking cookies and Dad was outside throwing the football with him. And the football player, when he gets on television, what does he say? "Hey, Mom, it's me." Why is that? Because moms have an influence on the life of every child that reaches from the cradle to the grave. His mother was his counselor to do wickedly. Here she is now engaging in a direct course of teaching her son not the ways of the Lord, but the ways of other gods. She's the one that has him in the lap. And instead of singing songs about the Lord like, the old rugged cross, or Jesus loves me, or the way of the cross leads home, or some hymn as a lullaby to put him to bed, she's singing him songs about the glories of Baal, the god of thunder. She's teaching him those scriptures. She's influencing him through that wisdom, which is not wisdom at all. And so what happens? She becomes his teacher. She is his, notice that word, isn't that perverse? The way it's put, his counselor to do wickedly. You mean to tell me that a mother would counsel her son to wickedness? Not a candidate for a Mother's Day sermon, is she? Not really. But let me ask another question. I asked you one when we talked about the conditions of her life, and is it possible for her to change? What about now? She's no longer under the shadow of Jezebel's throne. She's no longer watching Ahab do his wickedness. She no longer hears the voice of her grandfather in her house. She no longer has to see all the horrors that are going around in Samaria. She's at home in Judah. She's in Jerusalem. She has this baby boy named Azariah in her lap. Is it possible for her now to change the culture of her home? It is easier for a mom to change the culture of a home than it is for a dad. Because mom has the children's hearts more than dad does sometimes. Mom's the teacher in the home. Mom's the one respected in the home because the home belongs to mom. And that's where the babies are growing up. And if she wanted to, she could have changed the culture in that home right now. Do not give me your excuses about why your home can't follow the Lord. Because I know that it can. And all it takes is a decision from you right now. That's all. It doesn't matter who you're married to. It doesn't matter where you came from. It doesn't matter who your daddy is, who your mama is, who your grandpappy is. It doesn't matter any of that. All you have to do is say, no more. No more in this house. And ladies, I guarantee you, everybody will snap to. If you say, we're going to follow the Lord in this house. And you can go out and play your games wherever you want to play your games. But here, between these two doors, we're going to serve the Lord. And I'm going to teach these children about Jesus. Don't tell me you can't do that. The only reason it hasn't happened yet is because you're scared or you don't want to. If you give that to the Lord today, if you give your condition, your situation to the Lord Himself right now today, things would change. Beginning today. It's up to you, Mom, because you've got the ability. The Lord has placed you in the home with the ability and the resources to change the culture in the home. But you see, Athaliah didn't make that choice. She counseled her son to do wickedly. Not only did she counsel her son to do wickedly, she connected him to others who did wickedly. Look at verse 4. Wherefore he did evil in the sight of the Lord like the house of Ahab, for they were his counselors after the death of his father to his destruction. Not only did she teach him, but she connected him to people who would teach him. She introduced him to influences that would teach him. Think about your past. And think about the people that your parents connected you to. I'm sure some of those people maybe are just not even worth mentioning. But then there are some that you reverence like a father or a mother. People that maybe you call aunt or uncle. People that may not even be related to you, but you love them so much, and the wisdom that they gave you and shared with you in your life because you had parents who handed you off to them. And those people, even as much as mom and dad, had an influence on your life. You think of those folks right now? See, that's what Athaliah did, but she did it in a perverse way. She gave her son off to people who would teach him the things of Ahab and Omri, to teach him the ways of wickedness and evil. That's what she did. Who are you handing your children off to? Who are the teachers that you're introducing and connecting your children to? You know, you can change that too. Because your children will listen to you when you say, stay away from so-and-so. They don't serve and love the Lord. They'll hear you and they'll listen. And you can influence them to connect with people that are godly. You can influence them to connect with people that have a witness. You can influence them to connect with people that walk in holiness. Moms. You see, because Athaliah didn't. Could she have? Could she have introduced her son to teachers and connections that served the Lord and followed His ways? Absolutely, she could have. I'm sure sitting there in the palace of Judah, of the kings of Judah, the same palace that Solomon built. All that history in that place. And she has that baby boy on her lap, and she could probably look out her window, at least one set of her windows somewhere in that palace, and see the temple just a stone's throw away from where that palace was built. And she could have probably sent a messenger to that temple and had some priest or some Levite come to her house and teach her child in the ways of the Lord. It was right there. It was at her fingertips. But what did she do? She called to Samaria, long distance. Hello? Yes, would you send somebody down to teach my boy about Baal? Thank you. She probably knew all of them. All the priests and all the folks that worked in that wicked, evil culture. And she invited them down instead of looking just across the street to the temple and teaching her son, having someone come in to give her son right instruction, detailed instruction, catechizing him in the ways of the Lord. But she didn't. Could she have? Could you have, Mom? Can you still? Absolutely. There's still time for you to make that change and to connect your children with the right folks. There's still a time for you to be an influencer in the home and to walk with the Lord and teach others to do the same. There's still time for you to call upon the grace of God and forget your past. I don't care how abusive it was. I don't care how messy it was. And ask Him to save your soul and redeem you for heaven. This lady, Athaliah, is a story of what could have been. And you know what happened to her son? This is the end of the story. Her son reigned for 1 year. Do you know why he didn't last any longer than that? Because he was with a son of Ahab when Jehu showed up. Now, Jehu had been appointed by the Lord to destroy Ahab's house. And so Jehu finds Ahab's son and his men, and guess who happens to be visiting on that day? Ahaziah. And he kills him too. And now there's nobody left to Ahab except for Athaliah. And I would propose to you today that, well, wait a minute, before I make that proposition, notice what she does. You'll find the destruction of Ahaziah there in verse 7 and in verse 8. Verse 10, here's what she does. 2 Chronicles chapter 22, verse 10. But when Athaliah, the mother of Ahaziah, saw that her son was dead, she arose and destroyed all the seed royal of the house of Judah. Now that's King James for she killed all her grandbabies. She killed all of her grandchildren by Ahaziah. Well, that's gross. That is gross. But you know what? She had done that long ago. She had killed all those grandbabies by teaching her son the ways of Baal. She had killed all those grandbabies by teaching her boy how to walk in the ways of Ahab. She had killed all those grandbabies by introducing him to connections to do wickedly. That's what she had done. So really, when it comes to the death of Ahaziah, and she kills all the grandbabies, well, that's just sort of like an afterthought for her, because she'd already done that work. She'd already done that work. She didn't remember what the Scripture said, that righteousness tendeth to life. He reigned 1 year. 1 year. Got caught up in the judgment of God against Jehu. And probably Jehu couldn't tell a difference between Ahaziah and Ahab's son, Joram. Probably didn't know the difference between the two, because they both acted the same, probably both talked the same, probably both looked the same. What could this mom have done? I think is a message for us. Mom, what can you do?
Jesus will meet you.
Thanks for listening to this week's message. Please join us again next time for another installment of the Creek Road Baptist Pulpit.